You want me to put that on my Tudor?
This one's wife. Familiar hate. Hello, I'm HG Tudor. You're haters. Y'all jealous. You don't know her. You're racists. The familiar squawks of the shuggers which have become their calling cards. Invariably, based upon a complete absence of evidence to make such accusations, that they fall back on these standard allegations because they lack the equipment cerebrally to engage in a reasoned discussion based upon the actual evidence. Now it is evident that there are some people who hate this one's wife, but the majority of individuals dislike her, disapprove of her, or find her behaviour disgusting. But to translate it into hate is far too strong. But it's a repeated knee-jerk response that occurs by those that are supporters of this one's wife. And it behooves a moment to consider, why do these individuals support her? Well, many of them are actually just paid supporters. They're either bots or individuals that don't earn a lot of money and have been paid in order to advance a supportive position for this one's wife, and therefore their loyalty is simply based upon payment. There are others who somehow believe that there is some kind of sisterhood between them and her. Many of these individuals are people who are of colour, and they have been duped by this con woman into thinking that she's interested in advocating their interests and requirements. She's not. She's held herself out as being Caucasian. She behaves, to all intents and purposes, as if she's Caucasian. She doesn't give a fig about people who are of colour. Why? Because she's a narcissist. And until it served a purpose to identify as a person of colour, she didn't do so, demonstrating her chameleon-like nature. And yet, these individuals have been duped into believing that somehow they have a link with her, that she cares about them, that she represents them, and also that they vicariously live through her, because invariably those individuals lead rather humdrum, empty lives, and they think, well, she's one of us who's become a princess. Fantastic. She's our queen. And therefore, they have this misguided loyalty based upon all of those factors. There is another group that simply use this one's wife because it suits their agenda to do so. That they have an axe to grind based upon issues of race, and because she has made an issue out of her race, they see her as the poster girl for their particular campaign. That they are able to say, look at what's happened to this one's wife. It's disgusting, the racist hatred that she has experienced. And this then allows them to go on a particular rant, Shouty Shola being an example of that, where they disgrace themselves with an absence of evidence-based observations and cause much eye-rolling amongst individuals as they simply use the supposed support for this one's wife as a means to propagate their own agenda. And we see another example of this by harnessing the concept of familiar hate towards this one's wife, which is completely inaccurate. It appears in something called Advocate, and the article is written by Marie Adelina Della Ferriere. The headline of the article is, "The hate lobbed at Angelica Ross, this one's wife, is familiar to all black trans women. Deciding how to handle microaggressions and overt ignorance is a full-time job for trans women of colour." So this is a particularly niche group. Picture a sun-kissed young woman striding with the quiet confidence of someone who's battled endlessly to be acknowledged for who she truly is. Imagine the weight she carries, her womanhood, her melanin, and her trans identity, each aspect an undeniable part of her truth. Notice that stock phrase that's used by these individuals, my or their or her truth. That young woman, it's me. And my story, while unique in its chapters, is thematically synonymous with countless others, tales woven with threads of racism, sexism, misogynoir, and transphobia. Flashback to 2017. I orchestrated a meticulously planned debut for my new self, the full unveiling, if you will. A year into my hormone therapy, it was time. While the artsy backdrop of the museum I worked at promised an open-minded ambience, reality proved to be a cocktail too sour to endure. The first day donning my new name badge was met with a co-worker's scornful gaze and a boy who found my lashes a tad too bold for her taste. A boss, rather, who found my lashes a tad too bold for her taste. But this was only the opening act of the prejudices I would face. Now, of course, those are the experiences of that individual and relaying the prejudices that she had experienced. She's perfectly entitled to tell her tale. But this is where we see another example of such individuals supposedly supporting this one's wife, and all that they're doing is propagating misunderstandings about what she is and how people interact with her. The article continues, let's now saunter down Hollywood's glittered pathways where Angelica Ross graced the screens. But behind her illuminating performances lay battles against the intertwined adversaries of racism and transphobia. Although her star burns bright, her journey wasn't without dark episodes, like the casual misgendering by a peer and racially insensitive gestures by crew members. Her delayed revelations led many to question her rather than the culprits. Now, let's jet across the Atlantic to the regal corridors of Buckingham Palace. Now, let's not lose sight of the fact that this was released on October the 23rd, some 3.5 years after this one's wife had anything to do with the royal family in terms of being a working member. This one's wife, the talented actress, she's not that talented. If she were, she'd have had much bigger and better roles. She was mediocre. The talented actress turned princess, strictly speaking, although she's Princess Henry, she goes by the title Duchess, and it shows once again the fact that they misunderstand what she is, and they're injecting their own failed hopes of, I wanted to be a princess, and living through her. Found her Cinderella story, there we are, marred by veiled racism and overt sexism. Yet, are we going to be given any examples of this? Are we going to be given any detail of this veiled racism? Are we going to be detailed any of the overt sexism? If it was overt, there must be plenty of examples we can return to. No, none are provided, and they never are. There is just this blanket criticism of suggesting that she has been subjected to this familiar hate without giving specifics. Every gaze, gesture, and outfit analysed with racial undertones. How? How? Again, there is a failure to actually state what those racial undertones were. It's an assumption. In fact, one might argue that to make such an assumption is racist in itself. Her gaze has been analysed by virtue of the narcissistic stare that she has, the death stare that she utilised towards her own mother, towards Catherine. Her gestures have been analysed through the prism of her narcissism. Her outfits have been analysed because on the whole, they don't actually suit her. That's got nothing to do with her race, it's to do with her body shape, and more importantly, the fact that because of her narcissism, she thinks she looks really good in the outfits that she puts on, and she can't see that she doesn't, and that because she believes that she always knows best, she doesn't listen to the advice of stylists. The gaze, the gesture, the outfit is nothing to do with her race, it's everything to do with her narcissism. But once again, notice how I'm able to explain with evidence the gaze, the death stare, or the seductive stare, the gestures, the chopping of the air with her hands, and I've explained in repeated videos why she does that, the way that she gets in front of Harry, The gestures where she steers him, the grip of doom, are all explained with evidence. The issues with regard to her outfits, explained again with evidence by reference to the fact that she's deluded and thinks she looks really good when she does not, and the fact that she operates with a sense of entitlement, so she doesn't listen to the stylist. I do it all with evidence. This writer, every gaze, gesture and outfit analysed with racial undertones, no explanation of what that is, no evidence offered. The royal adage, never complain, never explain, was a mantra she seemingly had to swallow, much like the rest of us. These stories, Angelica's, this one's wife, mine, though set against different backdrops, strike a similar chord. Our worth constantly assessed, not by our feats and intelligence, but our ability to endure with poised silence. Or, perhaps more accurately, the worth, at least in relation to this one's wife, was assessed by virtue of her behaviour. That might be completely different for the author of this piece, but once again, she makes that familiar mistake of suggesting that it was about the ability to endure with poised silence. Endure what? A warm welcome, being given a staff to support you. Endure what? People saying, welcome, you're going to be like a breath of fresh air to the royal family. Endure what? Criticism that arose as a consequence of her own behaviour. The writer continues, but should resilience always be silent? This silence, often deemed as strength, has its price. I bore the brunt of the museum's microaggressions, but eventually found strength in voicing my displeasure. Speaking out wasn't an option, it was a necessity. It was in Angelica's defiance against Hollywood bigotry, this one's wife's raw revelations, which of course many of which were lies and revisions of history, and my stand against workplace prejudice that we found power in vulnerability. Empowerment for souls like us caught in the crosshairs of marginalised, if not overlapping marginalised identities, means carving out spaces where our stories resonate unapologetically. It means pushing boundaries and stepping away from spaces that smother us. It's speaking out, even when our voices quiver. It's in this one's wife relocating for her family's well-being. Which she didn't, she ran away in order to assert control through withdrawal. Angelica setting her sights on new ventures outside of Hollywood, and yours truly weaving narratives that represent my community. In a world where each of us bears the weight of my myriad expectations, isn't it high time we stopped merely enduring and started thriving? Advocate, challenge and take pride in every facet of who you are. As we continue to walk our paths, let's no longer bear our burdens in silence. Let's use our voices to declare our worth, and in doing so light the way for others. Now, all of that's fair sentiments with regard to that writer and her own experiences. But once again, you have an individual who is clearly a supporter of this one's wife, only doing so because it suits her agenda, and does so without recognising that she is a very poor example to use because it's her behaviour that has invited criticism and comment, not her skin colour. And once again, a supporter of this one's wife is only a supporter because she can be utilised for the writer's own agenda, even though, of course, we can all see that it is completely incongruous. There is the talk of familiar hate. Again, that's wrong. What it really is the familiar bullshit that is generated in relation to the sympathy that is exhibited towards this one's wife. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.